Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Spina, and I am so pumped for today's episode. We have the pleasure of having Michelle Shapiro joining us today. She is a functional dietitian, and we had so much fun talking today about so many different issues when it comes to nutrition, weight loss, weight management, how to find a middle ground somewhere between all of the sort of extreme dieting and the non-dieting culture, how to eat to reduce anxiety, how to optimize our hunger and satiety hormones, improve digestion, and a little hint, we talked a lot about prioritizing protein because we have very similar mindsets when it comes to that. And I love that Michelle shared her personal weight loss journey and everything that she learned from sort of doing it the quote unquote wrong way and then learning all of the right ways to pursue weight loss. And we talk about all of it on today's episode, how she lost over 100 pounds in 3 to 4 months when she was initially on her first weight loss journey and managed to maintain through learning a lot about health and nutrition and became inspired to actually become a functional dietitian. So we also talk about what a functional dietitian is. And I absolutely love Michelle. She is just so wonderful. She has amazing energy. And I love that she finds such a balanced approach when it comes to all of the noise and information out there about diet and nutrition. And she seems to have a very balanced and wholesome approach with her practice. So I can't wait for you all to listen in to today's episode. Before we jump into the episode, I want to take a really quick moment. Welcome to the Tone Device, the newest breath ketone analyzer by Ketogenic Girl. With the Tone Device, you can instantly know if you are burning body fat. You can say goodbye to expensive, painful ketone testing. With the Tone Device, you simply breathe into the device and you will get an instant reading, letting you know if you are burning fat or in the fat burning zone. With the Tone Device, you can now more easily and effectively reach your fitness goals using the feedback that it provides. Welcome to the Tone Device. Welcome to unlimited testing. Buy yours today and get in the fat burning zone. Now, without further ado, let's get into today's episode with Michelle. All right. Well, welcome to the Optimal Protein Podcast, Michelle. How are you doing on this beautiful Wednesday morning?
I'm so excited to be here with you, Vanessa. I'm pumped. We're going to talk protein and I'm sure a whole lot else. I'm very excited.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was just telling you that I feel like I spent the morning with you because I was listening to some wonderful interviews that you've done with our mutual friend, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and some other interviews. And it was so fun because I think on all the episodes you covered such a large breadth of different topics. And there's some that I definitely resonated with. So I'd love to start out just by hearing a little bit about your personal story, because I always love to hear people's personal reasons or motivation for getting into health and wellness. And I know that our listeners will probably relate to some of the aspects of your own health journey.
Absolutely. First of all, major shout out to Gabrielle. She's one of my best friends in the entire world. So a mutual friend of Gabrielle's. We're already besides the fact that you were listening, we're already best friends. It's not even a question for sure. So I am a functional registered dietitian. I always had grown up in New York City, and growing up, I always occupied a larger body. And going into college, I knew that while New York City is a super diverse place, in my opinion, a super non-judgmental place, if I was going to go into kind of a more homogenous environment, I was going to have to present well. And I thought I'm going to want to lose weight before I go to school. So I went on a rapid weight loss journey, which I definitely would never recommend to my clients or anyone, because I had lost, and I'm issuing a little bit of a trigger warning for people, but close to 100 pounds in about a 3-month period of time. And after that, went into school and just was burdened with tremendous chronic illness. I was able to keep the weight off, but as I lost weight so rapidly, kind of my health declined a lot. And that was because my body was kind of thrown out of the state of homeostasis. I had panic attacks. I had thyroid disorders, all these things that I never had before. And they just started popping up. And it was really my healing coming back from what that weight loss and that journey of weight loss had kind of how it had changed my body that brought me into the kind of sphere of functional nutrition, and that healing process, naturopathic and functional nutrition. And so I want my clients, if they're going to lose weight in a way that doesn't hurt them on the back end. And I help clients to heal anxiety. And I use the word heal specifically because I'm not a big fan of managing anxiety. I want to get in there and do it right. And healing and supporting gut issues too. I can't hear your sound for some reason, Vanessa. Oh, you're muting. That's why I was like, okay.
Yeah. I'm so curious what your protocol was when you lost 100 pounds, because you said that it wasn't, obviously you're talking about the time frame, was so accelerated, and that's definitely not like a healthy pace to lose weight at in that short period of time. But I want to eventually get to like what you should do, when you're dieting. But what did you do in that approach that sort of was so effective in that short period of time? Because I'm sure you learned a lot from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're asking the right question. I'm on the right podcast for this answer. Also, I did a very, very, very low calorie, low protein vegan diet during that time. So I feel like every healer and every healthcare professional has tried every direction of restriction because we are like guinea pigs onto ourselves. And we're also so eager often to heal our own ails. We'll try anything. And honestly, this was 15 years ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. So yeah, about 15 years ago, like the vegan diet was what every doctor was recommending at the time. It was like conventionally, I was in dietetic school. Of course, they were saying even then, like you need to supplement if you're on a vegan diet, but it was still touted as the most helpful diet. So for me, I was like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it well. And I actually ended up being vegan for many, many years after that. I was vegan for about like 10 years.
Yeah. I turned vegan when I was 17, also because I had anxiety about going to university, and was vegetarian after that for like 17 years. It took me a really long time to break it. But what makes me sad about what you said is I'm like, I think that's still what so many people think of as the optimal healthy diet, is being vegan, or at least plant-based is like what a lot of people think of as the ultimate. And there were a lot of reasons why we both thought that way, right? And and thinking back now, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I could do it now. If I could do it again, the way that I would like supplement more strategically and intelligently. But back then I know that I wasn't getting enough protein like anywhere near as much. And it's sad that I think some people still revere that as like the ultimate way to gain health.
Yeah, I just went on a podcast that had a decent amount of exposure, and there were vegans like attacking me in the comments because I said grass-fed beef was healing, which I completely stand behind and absolutely endorse, because they were like, how is something dead healing? So the other issue with the vegan diet is, besides that the science, I know please, Vanessa, it was a wild experience. Like the comments were out of this world. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know where people are. It was so many like that and constant. It's not only this like scientifically questionable process, it's also such a moral, political, religious, like it's so much more than that. And it's so hard to break down those barriers for people because you can't question someone's morality or ethics when you're trying to have a scientific conversation. So it's really, it's like extra challenging. And yeah, I agree. I mean, the funny part is we both were doing what was like good, right? Like quote, like I lost a lot of weight. People were complimenting me left and right. They're like, this is good. You're doing a vegan diet. You're doing the best things, but we got really crappy results as from doing that.
The most ironic thing for me is my vegan naturopath at the time told me to start eating meat again because my health deteriorated so much. He's like, no, you need to eat some poultry and like fish and slowly like bring meat back in. I was like, really? Like you're telling me this? Like that's like, he knew.
That's a bad sign for veganism. Exactly. And you know what? I think there are probably people's bodies who actually do well on a vegan diet when it's well supplemented. And so I can't argue that. And I'm also never going to argue the politics, religious morality of a vegan diet for anyone. If they don't want to eat animals, please, like that's their prerogative and their choice. what is so interesting is that like the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics will even say a well-planned vegan diet with supplementation can be healthful. What is always fascinating to me, and again, we're in the right place to talk about, is what they're talking about is the micronutrient issues with veganism. The protein recommendations we have are still too low, even with people who consume meat. So I think that it's not that often addressed. And I know that a lot of like vegan proponents will say things like, there's protein in broccoli. Like, it's like, yeah, but what's going to happen if I eat 100 cups of broccoli? Like, I'm going to be hospitalized from like colon impact. Like, I'm going to have like a huge problem, you know? So I think that like literally have an impact to colon. So I think that that piece of it for the vegan diet specifically is such an issue for me, because yes, the micronutrients are often documented. Like you have to get B12, iron, vitamin D, like calcium. These things are necessary, but the protein issues with it are so scoffed off by people. They're like, no, forget it. You can eat broccoli, you can eat quinoa. And it is one of the biggest concerns for me with a vegan diet, of course. And I know for you, look what podcast we're on, of course.
Yes. And I just think it's I uphold that for anyone who makes that choice. Like, I have nothing against people wanting to do that. Like you said, for moral, ethical reasons, like that was, part of my motivation when I was doing it. But I also think there's a privilege that you have to be able to have to do a vegan diet and be able to like afford all the B12 and choline and, the special supplements and things that like people who are below the poverty level, like cannot afford to do. And so when you're like pushing that, anyway, it's a whole other.
No, that's a really, really good point. For a vegan diet to be accessible, you need a lot of supplementation. And this is such a bigger, profound conversation that I need to touch on for 1 second. I have two amazing friends who are vegans and they work in lower income neighborhoods with nutritional support. And what they talk about, they're vegan lit on Instagram, they're incredible, is that if you especially can't get high meat quality, like the argument is, if you're eating really crappy meat, is that worse than not eating meat at all? And it's like that's such a bigger conversation, I guess. And I think they feel like because people have such low access to high quality meats and what they're getting is so processed, that for them, they feel like omission is safer almost. But it's just an interesting, I know, and conversation.
Yeah, I know it is. I always go back to eggs and ground beef. It's like, it's not the hardest, or even canned fish, canned sardines. Like there's a lot of protein that you can get that I think people can afford at that level. Absolutely. Even. And, but yeah, I want to get back to your personal mission. Like, I feel like we could go on tangents.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Or no, please don't. But I'd love to know, like, how did you get from being there, like vegan, you lost 100 pounds, you're feeling maybe good about the weight loss, but not so good, like physically or energetically, or maybe mentally. How did you get from that to like where you are now? And what does that look like?
Totally. So I ended up seeking the help of a naturopathic physician for the anxiety after I had done what I called like my own battle plan. And I call it a battle plan because I like to break up any plan that I make for my clients or myself into different parts. So it's like, how do you handle this from a lifestyle perspective, supplement perspective, hydration, food, every single angle. And I started to think for myself, I was a person who never had panic attacks or anxiety. And now I'm a person who's having panic attacks several times a day with vomiting, with like complete disassociation. How did I get here, and what is my pathway forward? So I just started reading and compiling all this information. I'd say my panic attacks and anxiety were about 80% improved. And then I said, I need to go kind of to the finish line. And that's when I sought the help of a naturopathic physician who ended up being my business partner and best friend. And we ended up co-creating an anxiety program together. And he basically said, here's, a Dutch test. Here's what's going on with your hormones inside. And from there is when I realized, like, I'm not getting out of this without eating meat. I'm not getting out of this without consuming a much more broad nutritional profile within all that I'm eating. And then I started to reintroduce things. And then I started to add things back in, even though it was very scary, because if you're vegan for a long time and then you aren't vegan, it's like super scary. And then I started to incorporate all that lifestyle stuff that became really, really important for me. And then by the time I was restored and felt a lot better, was able to formulate and understand what I needed to do for clients to make sure that they didn't do it the way that I did it. I'm like, don't do this, that you have to repair after, basically.
That's amazing. And it sounds like working with this person maybe inspired you to pursue functional nutrition. So
It
I'd love for
did.
you to explain
Yeah.
to our listeners what that is. I actually hadn't heard of the term before, only
Oh,
functional medicine. Like I hadn't
medicine,
heard
probably.
functional
Yeah, yeah,
nutrition.
yeah. I'd love to. So when I think of functional medicine or functional nutrition, I'll give the example of if you have a thyroid condition, let's say, and you went to a conventional medical doctor, an allopathic medical doctor, they would say, okay, here's a thyroid pill. This is exogenous thyroid hormone from a pig. You take that and your thyroid, it's like basically that pig thyroid is going to replace the necessity for your body to make its own thyroid. What a functional medicine doctor or functional medicine nutritionist would ask is, well, why is your body not producing thyroid hormone in the first place? And we would want to understand the mechanism of your body where the liver is converting where the thyroid is being converted in the liver. Why is your body not converting thyroid to its active, form? We would want to understand what's going on with your gut to then be able to facilitate your own body's ability to heal. So how can we help your body to start producing thyroid hormones again? And really functional nutrition is just of the belief that there's a root cause to our health ails, and we are very interested in finding out what that is and then interested in helping the body to heal itself.
I love that. Now, one of the things that I heard you cover, and this is my absolute fascination along with the mitochondria, is the hormone leptin,
Oh
because
yeah.
we only relatively recently discovered it. And the amount of research that has come out about leptin in the last like 25 years is really amazing, or 30 years. What have you come to sort of understand about leptin when it comes to like weight management for people? And I guess we could talk about ghrelin a bit too, but I'm more curious about your thoughts on the relationship between leptin and insulin as well.
Yeah, we could definitely talk about that. So leptin is released from our fat cells or adipose tissue, and it is a hormone alongside with ghrelin. They are satiety or hunger hormones, right? So they're ghrelin more so signaling hunger and leptin signaling satiety. What we've noticed in major weight loss and otherwise people who are weight loss resistant is that one kind of major indicator we see kind of across the board is that leptin levels are often altered, meaning they're either too high or you're not sensitized to leptin, aka your body can't recognize it. And the one example I use on a lot of podcasts and talk about is the Biggest Loser study, which I cannot get over because I know it was like 8 years ago and I'm like still not over it, 7 years ago, where they studied 14 out of 16 of the contestants who lost a tremendous amount of weight on The Biggest Loser. And their metabolisms after a very long period of time had not adapted and their metabolic capacity had not adapted at all. AKA if they started off at, let's say, 300 pounds, and I'll arbitrarily use this number, that they burned 3,000 calories at 300 pounds. By the time they lost weight to be 150 pounds, let's say a 150-pound person burns on average, 1,500 calories, they were burning 1,000 calories a day. So their basal metabolic rate after like 10 years after being on the show had not come up. And my thoughts are, what the heck happened there? Like, why didn't their metabolism accommodate? Why didn't it adapt and bounce back? And one of those mechanisms, I think, is our leptin levels. And what we know now influences leptin is inflammation for sure. And we know that there's subtle, silent inflammation happening from cues in our environment and our food supply all the time, even stress. And what we are noticing that is super supportive for leptin is muscle building, protein, things that induce satiety, and things that positively influence inflammation. So it would be anti-inflammatory. I also will tell you that there's a leptin diet that exists, and it is literally just consuming like super bland foods. And I have this weird inclination because I'm a person who is very aversive to flavor. I'm the most boring eater in the entire world. I think it might have been an advantage for me why I was able to keep my weight loss off this whole time, is just because I happen to be a person who enjoys very bland foods, because the specific combination of the standard American diet of fat, sugar, and salt together can really create this no satiety zone, which can alter your leptin levels too, for sure.
Did it happen to be the book Mastering Leptin?
I like the book
Richards?
Hungry Brain by Stephan Guyenet.
Oh, okay.
He's freaking awesome.
I've heard him on Peter Attia.
Yeah, he's incredibly brilliant.
That's right. He did obesity research.
Yes. By the way, both those books are extremely valid. I mean, it's where he
I
also
just
had, oh, go
I
ahead.
hadn't
Yeah,
heard the
please.
bland foods thing yet. Like there's a kind of a prescription in the
Oh yeah.
Mastering
Yeah.
Leptin one. So that's an interesting one.
So it's literally called the Leptin diet. And I apologize for not knowing the creator of it, but it is commonly used in like functional medicine doctors and naturopathic doctors' offices. I don't see it in nutritionist offices as much. It is something that I'll use and we'll talk about this too. Like I have the keto diet is like a back pocket for me, and I certainly use it with clients. And there's indications for it. The leptin diet's also like if someone's experiencing weight loss resistance for a long time, and I'm like, I know this person's eating 1,500 calories a day and not losing weight. It's one of those tools that I have in the back pocket that we can say, let's experiment and play with this. And I've seen pretty good results.
There's also, I don't know if you've seen the Leptin Reset, I think RX by Dr. Jack Cruz. That one is really
Sure.
interesting because he recommends eating your first meal of the day being protein focused, like a good amount of protein and fat and not so much, cereal and
Of
orange juice.
course.
But also eating within an hour of waking
Sure.
and sort of lining up with your circadian rhythm. So,
My
um,
guess is also the game with that, because I always want to know like what's the game with that, is that leptin and cortisol are also related,
mm,
obviously because cortisol's role in inflammation. So I would say that if something is making your cortisol higher, you're going to be in a constant state of unchecked inflammation, because cortisol helps to check inflammation. It also can be pro-inflammatory as a hormone, but it helps to check inflammation. So I think that consuming, and I have a little uh device that I give to clients, which is 30 grams of protein and 30 grams of carbs within 30 minutes of waking up, is really the 30-30-30 rule is really helpful specifically for cortisol, because our bodies are very primed to fear starvation, as we know, but we also need starvation in some capacity for some of the things we want to do, like the cellular cleaning and fat loss for many of your clients, of course. And that in a person who's in a very high stress state can just kind of tell your cortisol like, hey, we're good. You can kind of cool off, because in the morning our cortisol is really high, and consuming that specific combination and time can cool your cortisol off a little bit.
I love how you brought up the Biggest Loser study. I found that one fascinating. I'm just so curious if I know they were doing a lot of exercise. I wonder if they were prioritizing protein and
When they
building
got home.
muscle.
Yeah. So I have to tell you, like on the show, The Biggest Loser, they were grotesquely under eating calories for the amount of exercise they were doing. So I would say if you're already under eating calories, the likelihood you're under eating protein is already higher. And I've
Mhm.
seen like The Biggest Loser, like 1,200 calorie plans that were like released by some producers at some point in time. And I would say they were definitely less than like 100 grams of protein a day. Like they were maybe like 120. And these are people who are in 400-pound bodies, some of them.
Right. Yeah,
So good point.
when I picture it, I just remember like I saw some clips of it on TV and it was just like people on the treadmill for like hours and hours a day. And I'm like, I just
You're
am
like,
so
go
curious.
towards the weights in the gym. Don't be on the treadmill the whole time. Yeah, it's very like, I mean, it was of the time, right? There obviously is some it was so massive in that it did make us understand that like weight loss, if you have a severe calorie deficit and you are working out many hours, like weight loss is going to happen for some people or most people. But we also learned a lot of the costs, I think, of that, because the people also, when they came home from the ranch, they were exercising like crazy, Vanessa. It's not like they came home and they were binge eating or anything like that. It was very insidious, the weight loss they
Mm,
had. It wasn't like they just abandoned all tactics, but their like basal metabolic rate was literally 600 to 700 calories lower than they thought it was and that they anticipated it to
brutal.
be. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
10 years after. I know it's quite devastating, to be honest with you.
I'd be so curious what their body composition changes to were like on that kind of thing where if you're just like under eating calories and just doing cardio, like how much muscle did they lose? Like do they have theories on
Such a good
why
question.
the metabolic
They
rate?
might have body comp on in the study. So I definitely I don't want to misspeak on the numbers on that. But they might have had body comp in the study, and you're absolutely right to be interested in that. And I would like to know too. We'll have to circle back to that. It's really important too. Yeah.
So what do you think is the main reason why their metabolic rate slowed so much? Was it like an overcompensation?
Survival. I think just survival mechanisms. And I do think there's a leptin piece of this too. So
Right.
obviously if your leptin is not sensitive and you're leptin resistant, it means that no matter what you eat, you're not going to feel satisfied and full. And there's an extent to that, right? I don't mean it's not like, Willie Prater syndrome where you're literally never going to feel full. But if you are constantly feeling hungry and then your metabolism also compensates to move slower, you're in a recipe for weight regain. I was impressed that they were able to maintain any of the weight loss after that with what was going on with their leptin levels and what was going on with their metabolic compensation. I thought that was like super impressive, honestly. And I know a lot of people pass so much judgment on the contestants saying they went home and they did whatever they wanted. And like, so wasn't the case, as evidenced even by the study.
Yeah, it makes sense that that's what you would assume. Like they didn't have
Yeah.
trainers there anymore to like push them to the brink.
Yep.
So
And all of them were working out hours a day still, Vanessa. Like they were working out like
Wow.
crazy. And I think they were lifting weights, but on the show, certainly they were lifting weights, but I feel like there was a lot of cardio too. I don't know the exact, like everyone's process is different, but I would assume it was a lot of cardio and a lot of under eating.
When you were on your weight loss journey, was it just primarily the diet or did you also do exercise during that time?
Cardio, like
Yeah.
crazy cardio junkie. Yeah. It was like so the energy of like elliptical,
Yeah, I was
treadmill, interval training on that. Like that was so the vibe then,
yeah.
where that was what I was doing for like hours on end. I was on the elliptical for like hours to the point where like I once remember trainers being like, can you not, like, I remember someone in the gym coming out to me and being like, we're going to ask you to go. Like, you're not supposed to be on this elliptical for like hours a day. But and I'm sure you're like this too. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And so I basically was trying to get my calories to like 0, which is extremely disordered. But I was like, how do I burn the same amount of calories I'm eating and just eat as little as possible? Which wasn't that taboo then. It was like eating disorder city then. Everyone, like, eating disorders were popular then. Like that was promoted, So but that was definitely my goal, was how do I be as little on my numbers as possible.
So at what point in your journey did you start like prioritizing protein more? And I'm guessing you do resistance training now too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I started prioritizing protein more, I would say, during probably the first year of my even working with anxiety. That was one of the things that actually, even at the time, I was like, oh, they're the basis of our neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
Like I started to be like, wait a second. Like
Yeah.
when it came to digestion and it came to immune system and it came to anxiety, I was like, this seems really important. I also started to understand so much more how important for me blood sugar stabilization was. And of course,
Mhm.
for everyone. And I realized I was swinging so low. There was one point my hemoglobin A1C was like a 4.2, which is like a trending glucose, I think, of like less than 70. And then you can drop lower or higher. And I realized it was that I was constantly low, but also that like I wasn't able to get my blood sugar stable at all. And that's when I started to really introduce protein to just get my blood sugar nice and even. And that, I would say, like, again, we're talking about 10, 15 years ago, is when I really started to focus on consuming more protein. And I instantly started feeling better when I started introducing first fish. That's like always, I feel like people who are transitioning from vegan, they like put their toe in the fish bucket first.
Yeah.
And then I started to eat meat later on.
Yeah, it's like seafood, poultry. It took me so long to just be able to like touch beef again. It's
100%.
like such a weird thing. Like you, especially when I think you're vegan, you watch a lot of like, if you do watch a lot of the like vegan documentaries, and
Oh
it
my
just like
God.
conditions you more and more. And you get to the point where it's hard to like, I still have a lot of like guilt, like just eating meat, and not being vegan, because you do it for such a long time that it's like so embedded in your psyche. But I'm
It's a
constantly
spiritual thing. It is. And you're also like the living nature of animals is something we should always be considering and giving blessings. Like every time I eat meat, I'm always like, thank God for the food that's in front of me. I think that's like really important. And thinking about how like the life that's being passed to you. I do think it's also a very beautiful like circle of life thing where it's like this life's energy is being was given to me, and I am now using it to create life within myself and life force. And I think that's very powerful about meat. And I also will say what's really fascinating about veganism and converting to eating meat is that you end up using very little stomach acid to break down plant foods. So what happens is you don't have enough stomach acid oftentimes to crave meat in the first place. So what I see for a lot of people who have low stomach
Mm,
acid is they actually lose their interest in consuming protein foods. And that's because consuming animal foods, it's a very intensive liver, gallbladder, stomach process. And we need a decent amount of stomach acid. And our bodies are amazing in that we are so efficient that we only create the amount of acid we need to get the job done. So if you're consistently not utilizing a lot of acid, we're not going to
yeah.
anticipate that we need that much acid. So I do notice with people when they start eating protein, if they feel like, ugh, I don't want it and I'm not interested in meat, part of that could be needing to address stomach acid issues, which I know you've covered on the show before, but I always think it's very important around this vegan to meat conversation for sure.
Did you ever like use any digestive enzymes or
Totally.
support like that when you were, that's something I
Yeah.
wish I would have had back then, but
Yeah. So I remember this, my friend in high school told me that when because he was vegan before I was, and then he started eating meat and he was like, I got this like really weird stomach pain when I started eating meat. And then I did not, by the way, when I started, I don't know if you did, but I personally didn't, but he was like, and I learned it's because your body doesn't have enzymes to like break down the thing. And he explained to me, he's like, these little Pac-Men that can't break down food. And we were like 18. And I was like, this is very impressive that he knew this then. And so when I started my meat transition and I had acid reflux while I was vegan, which was because I already had too low of stomach acid, I'm assuming, I started adding in just like bitters and ginger and things like that in the beginning before, because I wasn't really tolerating the enzymes because enzymes still live in acid. So if you don't have the acid, the enzymes aren't going to do the work that they need to do. And I actually tried like a betaine HCl test in the beginning and I couldn't tolerate just taking acid pills. So I just started really gently with some bitters, really gently with some ginger. And that's how I kind of eased my way in. And then my appetite for protein also came up too.
that's really cool that you had a friend who told you about the
I know.
back
I'm
pain.
like, I'm like, that was like so insightful. He was like, yeah,
Yeah.
this weird pain because your body can't break it down now. And I'm like, damn, man. Now I'm thinking back on it. I was like, that was so smart. So
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, it probably helped that we like slowly gradually went back into with like, the seafood and that kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah.
Whereas like um yeah, if you maybe do too much at once, it might be a little hard. I'd love to talk a little bit about finding the middle ground. I know that's a philosophy that you have with your practice, and it's a really interesting dichotomy that we seem to have now, or you're kind of in these different like silos when it comes to like
Mm,
online nutrition, where it's like you're either super into like fitness, maybe protein, resistance training, and you're able to have conversations about body recomposition and like body conditioning, and maybe you want to lose a little bit of fat for summer and
sure.
like get put on some lean mass. Like I feel like every time I mention fat loss, I have to talk about also gaining lean mass because
Sure.
I mean, it's very important because you don't want to like be losing lean mass when you're dieting or dieting wrong, but it's either that or you can't even like talk about dieting. And I remember listening to this. I'm kind of not in that sphere at all, like the sort of body
Okay.
positivity, even though
Sure. Of
I'm positive about my body and other people's bodies.
course.
Like, but I was listening to this one podcast where the person was like a body positive, like in that sort of philosophy
Yeah.
of thinking. And I had enjoyed her podcast for a while. And then she made this it was strange to me statement saying, the fact that what they're telling you that what you could eat could give you insulin resistance or diabetes, it's just a lie. Like it doesn't matter how many like Oreos or cake or, cupcakes you eat, it's not possible to like give yourself diabetes. And I was like, I thought we debunked that a while ago. Um, but it's weird because it seems like in that camp, you can't even like want to diet or talk about dieting at all. Like it's sacrilegious. So what's your opinion of sort of what you see online? Maybe I feel like you see a little bit more of like both sides and
I'm
you
in that
on
middle.
this middle
Yeah.
ground.
First of all, that's egregious of a remark because you can
Yeah.
literally look at the action of insulin and the action of your blood sugar through literal testing that you do with your clients all the time. So
Yeah.
that's egregious. So I would say that in the 90s and before, there was an intense, and in the 2000s to 2010, there was an intense focus on dieting for aesthetic reasons, and diet culture is what we kind of classify as anything that's like very intentional dieting for weight loss reasons with a profitable gain to some sort of a diet company. That's what we think of as diet culture. Kind of a knee-jerk reaction to diet culture in the past few years has been this body positivity movement and intuitive eating as a not as much a movement, but as a set of principles and a way of eating. So it is absolutely true that people in larger bodies are discriminated against and stigmatized in society.
Yes.
We both know that. It's not even a question, and it's absolutely deplorable and disgusting. So let me just say that right off the bat. That is true and horrible and needs to change. On top of that, kind of in a more militant way, there's been this new leg of the body positivity movement, which says that any weight loss is psychologically damaging for you and you should never engage in weight loss. They also don't believe that weight loss efforts work. So I would say I'm very in the middle where I believe in intuitive eating principles. I think that being in touch with what your body's asking you for is essential for any health journey. And at the same time, I am a person who validates what my clients want. So if they come to me and say they want to lose weight, like we're going to lose weight, that's going to be one of the goals that we have. I never tell my clients you can't want to lose weight. And I certainly don't deny the science of nutrition because I'm a dietitian. So I always ask that question of like, how out of scope are we going if we're having only psychological conversations around food and our relationship with food and prioritizing that over our health? So I ask that question a lot, and that's something that I ponder and wonder because I do believe that nutrition work is full body, full spirit work, energetic work. It is not just focusing on your relationship with food. It's also not just focusing on the science of nutrition. It's both.
Yeah, I agree with so many of the things that you said. I find it a little concerning to hear that people are thinking that way because we do have, like in the US, for example, like only according to I don't know if there's been a more recent, study done on this, but like 12% of the population is metabolically healthy. So it's like, okay, 88 of us are not. And then we're going to be putting out messaging saying that, if you are in that position of being like, say, obese or morbidly obese, like you shouldn't do anything about it. And it's just strange. Like it's a bit strange thinking to
it's like a fear of eating disorders is worse than a fear of unhealthiness. I will also tell you, and you're going to be upset to hear this, that people do not in that very, very strong like version of that camp do not believe that weight and health are correlated at all.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, they actually just believe that diabetes and these conditions are genetic, which we know is just in the case there is type 1 diabetes that is obviously genetic. But in many cases of type 2 diabetes, it is not purely genetic, it is epigenetic, of course.
It just saddens me because I find understanding the science behind, the connection between nutrition and wellness to be so empowering. It's like, well, in the past, we had to just think, well, you would just, get your genetic material and you'd be predisposed to whatever. Now we understand epigenetic signaling and like environmental lifestyle factors. Like it's so empowering to me that you can generate more mitochondria if you want to. Like you can do all of these incredible things to your biology and like really thrive. And like I don't see our general population in North America to be thriving. Like I think it's like we're really far.
That's an understatement. Yeah. I think that oh, go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah. I love that you brought up the intuitive eating because I'm a huge fan of intuitive eating,
of course,
the principles behind it. But I found for myself, I can intuitively eat when I have certain like parameters around that. And that one of the biggest ones is like prioritizing protein. I can always intuitively eat protein. Like my body tells me instantly when I've had enough protein. Like it's like this magical macro whereas like with maybe French fries or ice cream, like I don't get that like, okay, we're good. No. I don't get that feedback. Totally. So how can you expect people to intuitively eat? And then I'll see posts of people being like, I'm intuitively eating my muffins and, donut or whatever for breakfast. And I'm like, but that, like, I understand the dream behind that of just like eating whatever your body tells you, but how can we, when we get so disconnected from our intuitive connection relationship with food and our bodies, like be able to intuitively eat? Like,
I often say that intuitive eating is a luxury for those who are not chronically ill. So
mm,
intuitive eating is not, oh, I feel like eating a muffin, so I'm going to eat a muffin. So,
yeah.
and I know you know that obviously, but for the listener, intuitive eating is a system of principles that help you to recreate that connection with your brain and your body to understand what your body wants more. But if that connection is severed by a biological mechanism, like for instance, if you have parasites and your parasites are telling you every single night you need to eat carbs at 12 a.m. because they're dictating to you what you need to be eating, it doesn't really matter how in tune you are somatically or intuitively with your body,
Hmm.
because those biological mechanisms are going to override your psychology. And intuitive eating is a set of psychological principles. So we can't offer only psychological principles
Hmm.
for physical solutions. Sometimes we need physical solutions, and oftentimes we need physical solutions. But we can honor our relationship with food and honor the fact that our body's telling us that. So what intuitive eating around a parasite would mean is like, well, the parasite's telling me that I want this. That doesn't mean that we eat it necessarily. And that's true for all of intuitive eating. But I think that eating intuitively really is for people who are not suffering with imminent or acute or chronic illness. I think it's a priority to have an amazing relationship with food and to listen to your body, but it's not a top priority for people who are freaking sick. Like that's not their top priority. And I think we need to honor that. And I do have a lot of clients who have been to intuitive eating and health at every size practitioners who have said, you can't focus on they said, if you focus on your relationship with food, your gut issues will get better, your insulin resistance will get better. And I'm like, if a relationship with food is not the reason for those conditions, it's not going to be the cure for those conditions either. It is
Yeah.
important, but it's not the cure.
Yeah, and I love the point that you brought up because I remember when I had a candida overgrowth, like in my early 20s,
Mm,
I had so many cravings for sweets and sugar, which I haven't experienced that in years since when you cut those foods out temporarily
totally.
can help to like get that under control. But I'm curious what you do like in your practice. So I know you offer very like tailored programs for all of your clients. How do you typically work with someone? What does that look like from like a functional nutritionist
Yeah, totally.
perspective?
So the first step is having people come in for their initial consultation. And during that time, we talk about like everything that's going on in their bodies. And I'm really trying to understand not only each piece of their body, but how each piece of their body is connected. So it could be something silly where I say, how are you sleeping? And they're saying, well, I wake up every day at 2 a.m. And I'm like, are you hungry when you wake up at 2 a.m.? Are you feeling like itchy when you wake up at 2 a.m.? Are you feeling like you want to call someone at 2 a.m.? And every single piece of those little tiny details can let me know a bigger picture of what's going on in someone's health. Functional nutrition testing is generally characterized by these fancy tests like the Dutch test, stool testing, all these things. For me, functional nutrition is about understanding the human being that's sitting in front of me and letting those signals guide me into what is going on under the hood. So during that consultation, I'm talking about the posture people are eating. I'm talking about who they're talking to on the phone before and after meals. I want to know that full context of what's going on. And then from that initial consultation, I pull together this exhaustive document, which is again that battle plan, which is those lifestyle supplement, hydration, food recommendations broken down in a very specific way. I have certain clients who might benefit from a keto diet. I have certain clients who might just need to do intuitive eating. It really depends on where the person is at. And then after that, we meet for follow-ups. And generally, people start with 3 or 6 months working together. And I have had some of the same clients for 5+ years weekly. And what we're working on changes. And it becomes more of that just coaching and having that point person for you who's like, this is what's going on. Can we interpret these signals for my body? So those are like my most special people and in my like life. Yeah,
Oh, that's really sweet. I can tell you really love your uh your patience and that you really get a lot of satisfaction out of helping them.
I do. It's my whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like such a big, I know you love the work that you do too. And it becomes so much of who we are. And certainly for both of us who were vegan for a long period of time, like I feel like I had the luxury, not luxury, the privilege, because it was not a luxury, the privilege of knowing like how it feels to feel so not well so that
Yeah.
I can really understand what my clients are saying to me. Like I've had every symptom under the sun and I'm like, honestly, it sucked at the time, but I'm grateful for it now.
Are you glad looking back that you lost the extra weight and like cuz I know you've been able to maintain it over the
Definitely.
years
Yeah.
because I know you experienced a lot of negative side effects, but did you have any like positives from it?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, from a societal standpoint, like things rapidly changed in college. Like, again, thin privilege is real. Like, it was a completely different experience for me as a result. And then physically not carrying that much weight, yeah, I think was beneficial for me. Absolutely. Like, if I had done it right the first time, I think I would have landed in a really healthy place and prioritized muscle and protein the entire way through, prioritized pacing and timing and priority of needs. But oh, certainly. I don't think weight loss is bad at all. I don't think all weight loss is bad. I think body comp changes can be completely life changing for people. So yeah, for myself, it took 10 extra years because of the way I did it. But certainly I ended up where I wanted to. And that would not have been possible if I didn't, and this is a weird way of saying it too, Vanessa, but sometimes you just have to like sledgehammer something, because I don't know that myself, I would have been able to do things like super slow and methodically. It's not really in my personality. I'm like, let's yoke this and let's do this. So it might have been just like what I needed at the time, and I didn't even know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, we talked about sort of like how weight loss has become a bit taboo, but what what recommendations do you have for people, like say people are listening and they're in sort of that like obese or morbidly obese situation and they want to find like a healthy way of approaching weight
Yeah.
loss, like pacing it? What are some of the key things that you think people should keep in mind?
I think prioritizing protein, I'm going to say that, is essential for people. I think that you need to organize your life and your brain in a way that is going to be easiest for you. So if you're a person who is overwhelmed by making changes, and this might be silly to say, but if you're a person who is overwhelmed by what do I eat every time, like what should I eat, and intermittent fasting works better for you because then you're only eating twice a day or something like that, do what is working best for your brain first, and then you'll find out what works for you physically. But make things so ridiculously easy for yourself to just start somewhere, just dip your toe in and just get going on something. I think that's really important. Don't make things hard for yourself, and then just also be like so ridiculously compassionate to yourself. Like,
Hmm.
wherever you are at is completely okay in this exact moment. Like, you are okay. You have not done anything wrong. You are not bad. And whatever you need to do to take yourself that one tiny step forward, I think is, from a psychological perspective, so helpful to just make it easy. And then I also just feel like uh really focusing on macros versus focusing on uh calories, I think works better for people generally too. And prioritizing protein, prioritizing high fiber carbohydrates, and I love fat too. So, and I know you do. Prioritizing like getting fats from really beautiful sources also.
Yes, all about those omega-3s and just the healthy
Hermanos, we love
sources of
them.
that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And I
So
love
good.
like butter and I love meat too.
Yeah.
They're abundant in nutrients. I would also say on a weight loss journey, be very mindful of your micronutrients the entire way through. And be very mindful of hydration. And I would say I think low and slow is an easier way to lose weight when it comes to leptin. So it might be
Mm.
appealing to lose weight like 6 pounds a week like I did. But I'm still paying, guys. So I wouldn't recommend it. If you can go low and slow, I'd recommend it.
So when you're working with a client typically for weight loss, like because I know you have the functional perspective, like are you testing leptin levels? Are you testing,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, thyroid? Like, are you looking to see if there's any like weight loss resistance there or hormonal issues?
Yeah, I'm often looking at cortisol, I'm often looking at hormones, I'm often looking at leptin. Again, leptin for me is more of a symptom of the fact that there's metabolic issues. I'm definitely wanting to know what is the source of those metabolic issues. So I'm looking at thyroid function, but then again, my brain's going, let's take it a step back. What's going on liver function? And when I'm also thinking about leptin and I'm thinking about fat tissues and how we store toxins, I'm also wanting to know like toxicology and understanding what's going on from a nutrient perspective, toxin perspective, organ function perspective. And yes, we could run the gamut of labs, excuse me, to see. And I'm often analyzing labs, but for me, labs are not the whole picture. I need to see them within the clinical presentation of what's going on with my client too.
Yeah, that makes sense to have context. I know you talked a little bit earlier about anxiety, and I'd love to just circle back on that as we
Sure.
sort of conclude. But how do you eat to reduce anxiety? And
Oh,
I think it's interesting that you have a perspective on it. It could be not just psychological, but also physiological cause.
oh, it's like my favorite thing to talk about in the world, by the way.
Awesome.
Um, Anxiety for me is something that is a messenger from our body. So anytime our body is dysregulated in some capacity, if we are deficient, dysregulated, our body is going to communicate anxiety to us as a sign or symptom. In the same way that you'd have a rash, anxiety is a different way of your body saying, I really need you to pay attention to what's going on here. A couple of the most common things I see that trigger anxiety in people is blood sugar dysregulation, gut
Mm,
issues, and chronic inflammation. So, all three of those should really be targeted to support anxiety. I'll say, on just a kind of a more like fun tip, just eating foods that are more grounding and warm and filling and that feel like less like a smoothie and more like a, I don't know, like a hearty meat bowl with broths and stews and things like that. Like eating things that feel nourishing, grounding, and warming can be really helpful for anxiety too, where cold foods can feel a little bit more like stimulating and fleeting. You want
mm.
that like feeling of peace and grounding coming down. I think that's super, super supportive for people with anxiety. And then getting your blood sugar regulated. Again, if we're something where intermittent fasting for me is contraindicated in people who are having active anxiety, because if our blood sugar goes low, our cortisol jumps up. And so if you're having constant high cortisol, you might want to take a break from intermittent fasting for a bit, just stabilize that blood sugar, and then you can go back to it. But I often see people with anxiety doing better with kind of like more meals throughout the day than less.
That's interesting. Is that sort of in a high carb context? Because I would imagine if they're doing more of like a low carb approach, that they would have some ketones there to help
Yeah,
balance the
ketones
blood
won't.
sugar lows.
Yeah, so cortisol is responsive to carbohydrates specifically because cortisol will trigger gluconeogenesis. So, specifically, our body will hunt for a way to create glucose specifically. So, if we have low blood sugar, cortisol will be triggered, but many people can tolerate that compensation. Many people
Mm.
are not too stressed where the highs and lows of cortisol are not regulated, but in times of extreme stress and the cortisol is too high, it's going to cause more of that cycle to be initiated. So many people tolerate intermittent fasting just fine because their cortisol is not like trigger happy, so to speak.
That's interesting. I wonder what
Oh,
causes that.
sorry. You
Is
know,
it
I'm still
the
I'm still here, but my
yeah, no worries.
sorry. Yeah, keep going.
Is
Let
it
me just adjust this. Mhm.
the levels of stress that people have like in their lives the main contributor to the cortisol sensitivity or
Yeah, I would say that the other thing about cortisol is that our nervous system learns by example. So we basically stay in a state of stress until we tell our bodies to stop being in that state of stress. So mental stress can influence cortisol levels. Hormonal issues can signal higher cortisol levels, and you're going to love this one. But cortisol blocks the action of insulin. So, and chronic hyperinsulinemia can also cause chronic high cortisol for people too.
oh, interesting. Yeah, that's really fascinating.
Yeah. So again, this process is our body is searching for triggers that we're going to die. And one of those triggers that we're going to die is, oh, there it is. Sorry about that. One of those triggers is that we're going to starve. So when we have low blood sugar, our body's like, help, we need to get sugar from somewhere. So let's start that process of gluconeogenesis. In a person who's not in a chronic state of stress, gluconeogenesis is super helpful. Like, as we know, we love gluconeogenesis. It's great. The fact that our body can create that and break down muscle to get that glucose and then rebuild is good for us. We have no problem with that. In a person who is chronically stressed, again, that process is not advantageous. And what ends up happening is you could then have too much glucose available. So this process of having constantly elevated cortisol leads to muscle degradation and fat storage because cortisol is again trying to save your life. So it's like, how do we save our lives? Oh, we'll break down muscle, which we don't need, and we'll hold in its head wrong. And we'll hold on to fat.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I know it's sort of debated what sometimes the sources of gluconeogenesis could be potentially glycerol coming from your fatty acids. Like if you're losing weight, I guess it depends on the context of like what's happening, but I think we definitely see that when people are doing like tons and tons of cardio,
Oh yeah.
which is like, and
Because
they're
it's
not,
like your body's like, are we running from a bear
yeah,
constantly?
yeah,
Your body's like literally so scared. Yeah.
yeah,
It's again, our body doesn't distinguish between running from a bear or sitting in traffic. If we're stressed because we're sitting in traffic, the same cortisol response is going to happen as if we're running from a bear. So because our bodies are extremely complicated and divinely brilliant, they still don't understand the difference between different types of stressors. All stress is the same. Even excitement can cause, a cortisol spike. But when you get into those cycles of it is when it becomes a problem.
yeah, that's really interesting. I remember having a friend scientist who he was wearing a CGM before a podcast, and he was like, I got all excited for the podcast, and his blood glucose was, he was getting like a alert or something that it was going up. He's like, I'm just excited. I'm not eating cake or whatever.
I'm just having so much fun with you on the
Yeah.
podcast. I'm sure my cortisol and my blood sugar is so high, Vanessa,
Yeah,
from today.
exactly.
For sure.
Same. I'd love to just ask you, as we wrap up, your 5 top healing foods.
Yes. I'm going to say the same one I said on the other podcast that I got in trouble for, but grass-fed beef is going to be my top one.
You won't get in trouble for that either.
Exactly. Because it's super, super nutrient dense.
It is.
And anything that's nutrient dense helps your entire body to function. So that's going to be my top one. I do love cruciferous vegetables because they support liver detox. So I eat a lot of those. I also love sweet potatoes. I think that they have a tremendous amount of micronutrients too. And I feel like they're very stabilizing and grounding. I love bone broth. I think that can be very supportive for people gut health wise, unless they're dealing with a histamine issue, and then it can be super not fun.
Yeah.
But for many people, bone broth can be really supportive and healing. And it's also those warm foods. And then I like, what's a fun one for my 5th? I mean, I just eat a lot of blueberries. I love them. I mean,
I had
I like
right before our podcast.
exactly. So your blood sugar's out of control. Because of the fun that we're having. Yeah, I like blueberries because I find them very stabilizing from a blood sugar perspective compared to other fruits, because of their fiber content. And I also
Yes.
feel like there's something very fun about having the experience of just, moseying in and eating little blueberry. It's fun.
I just was feeding my son Luca right before we came on this, and we were sharing a bowl of blueberries, and he likes to feed them to me.
Oh, I can't wait for my nephew to be able to have blueberries. He's too little.
Yeah.
He's only 8 months. That's so cute, Luca.
Yeah.
I love that.
He's so cute. It's yeah. Well, that's amazing. Well, tell everyone where they can connect with you online, get in touch, maybe if they are interested in doing a consultation or working with you. I don't know if you have like a wait list or space for people, but
Yes.
where can people connect with you? And I know you also have a podcast as well.
Yes. So first of all, Vanessa, I had so much fun with you today. I'm
Me
telling you,
too.
my blood sugar, my cortisol's through the roof. Thank you so much. You've ruined my day. I'm kidding. It was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. I have my own podcast called Quiet the Diet. And that is really a podcast where we explore that middle ground between you want to lose weight, but you want to have a really good relationship with food. You want to understand more about functional, holistic, integrative nutrition and medicine. It's been a joy, and we are on our 2nd season now. And I do have a private practice where I and my staff dietitian take clients one-on-one. Right now, by the time this is aired, I probably will still have a wait list. It's a couple months to work with me, but my staff dietitian, Nikki, who's been trained by me, is beyond exceptional. And she is taking clients and will be taking clients. I hope permanently. I hope she's with me forever. And we also just released an 8-week fitness and nutrition ebook, which I'm really excited about, called Just Start Somewhere, just to get people feeling like they need to take that one step forward in their health, but they don't want to make a huge one-on-one nutrition commitment, just to have something there. So all of that can be found on my Instagram at Michelle Shapiro RD, and I'll give you any other links you need.
Amazing. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. We'll definitely link all of that up in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining me today. I had so much fun with you, and yeah, I'm excited to go check out your podcast. I love the name of it as well. It's really nice.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you, Vanessa. Can't wait for you to listen too.
All right, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with my guest, Michelle Shapiro. She is absolutely wonderful. Please do connect with her, follow her online, listen, and subscribe to her podcast, which is called Quiet the Diet. I'm absolutely going to subscribe and listen. And if you are interested in working with her, definitely reach out and connect. It sounds like she has an incredible practice and also a wonderful dietitian working with her as well that works with the same principles that she has. So I think she'd be a wonderful, tremendous resource for anyone who is looking for a very personally curated, tailored, and detailed plan and approach that is really, customized to a person as an individual. And I really appreciate that she puts so much detail, thought, care, and also love into working with her patients. You can really tell that she loves working with her patients and that she just gets so much satisfaction out of helping them. So it was so much fun to chat with her today. At the beginning of the episode, we talked a little bit about red light as a nutrient and the fact that many of us are actually very deficient in this important nutrient. If you would like to check out the Tone Lux line of red light therapy panels that I personally created, you can check them out at ketogenicgirl.com. And of the Tone Lux Sapphire, the half body panel, which has 4 individual red light wavelengths, the Diamond, which is the beauty panel, as I like to call it, because it is the perfect size for the face and helping to stimulate all of those collagen and elastin factors, and the Gem, which is the portable version that we take with us everywhere we go, but is also a wonderful tool at home for doing targeted treatments on specific areas of the body and being able to get quite close to the skin, just hovering above the skin, because there are no non-native EMFs because it is not plugged in. It is a rechargeable device. You can check out all 3 of those panels as well as the Tone Breath Ketone Analyzer at ketogenicgirl.com, and feel free to send me a message if you have any questions about any of them. I would absolutely love to hear from you. So thank you all so much for listening. I am sending you all so much love, and until the next episode, wishing you a fat-fueled rest of your day. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.